So we know that zoning is broken. We know that there are exciting reforms underway at the state and local level. But we also know that there might be reason to be thinking in a more fundamental way about how we could change our system of land use planning. What would it look like to really move beyond zoning? For some clues, we can look to Houston, Texas, the only major American city that doesn't have zoning. Houston doesn't have zoning because it was the only major American city that actually put zoning to a vote, asking voters if they wanted to adopt zoning. They did this 3 times, and all 3 times voters said, no, we don't want zoning. In the most recent election in 1993, it was actually working class communities of all races who opposed zoning, understanding what zoning would have meant in terms of housing affordability and integration. Of course, there's a key compromise that saved Houston. In Houston, it's very easy for folks who have strong preferences about land use near them to privately opt into deed restrictions or covenants that lock in certain land use rules or density rules that might look a lot like zoning, but they can't impose those rules on their neighbors, and of course those rules don't apply anywhere where they're not already adopted. So what has this meant for Houston? Well, Houston remains one of the most affordable major cities in the country, even despite decades of population and economic growth. Houston is now, by one measure, America's most diverse city. It's a place where working and middle-class people of all races move to achieve economic opportunity and affordable housing. They're moving from places like Southern California and the Northeast to places where immigrants and refugees are commonly resettled, simply because the housing's so affordable and the economic opportunity is so great. And while Houston, of course, has sprawled a lot, like many cities in the Sun Belt, it's not all sprawl. Over the last few years, Houston has actually built more apartments than many coastal cities. And among the homes that are being built, the single-family homes that we talked about earlier, many are actually infill, townhouses or small lot single-family homes that are in existing urban areas and near job centers. To a degree unique among major American cities, it's easy for Houston to grow and adapt over time, certainly from a land use planning perspective. It's easy to take that single-family home that was once a starter home but is now luxury and turn it into 2 or 3 more affordable townhouses. You don't need a bunch of special permits and rezonings to take a strip mall on a corridor and turn it into a mixed-use multifamily building. These things can just happen over time. And that level of adaptability has kept Houston a place where the housing is affordable and there's great economic opportunity for people at all income levels. Now, as I mentioned earlier with deed restrictions and covenants, this doesn't mean it's a free-for-all. Many people voluntarily opt into land use rules with their neighbors. But even with public regulation, there's still many rules that are commonly found in zoning codes, things like minimum lot sizes, which, even though they've been significantly reduced, still apply. Or rules like minimum parking requirements. Houston doesn't have systematic use segregation or density rules, but it does require a lot of parking to be built. The good news is a lot of these rules are getting more and more liberal. As I mentioned earlier, minimum lot sizes were reduced in 1998, and over the past few years, the city has expanded the areas where minimum parking requirements simply don't apply. So what can we learn from Houston? The first thing is that zoning might not exactly be nearly as popular or necessary as is commonly assumed. When Houston voters were asked whether or not they wanted to adopt zoning, they said no. In most other jurisdictions, zoning was simply adopted by the city council after a commission report. It might not also be quite so necessary. Many of the desirable forms of land use segregation that we see in other zone cities still emerge in Houston. Industry doesn't want to be near residential any more than residents want to be near industry. And these uses, for the most part, naturally self-sort. It's not perfect, but we get a lot of it without even opting into zoning. The second is that maintaining this unzoned framework, this post-zoning framework, depends on, I think, 2 things. The first is having clear, enforced regulations for other impacts that people really care about. Stuff like noise, nuisances, impacts, etc. In Houston, there are still rules for certain uses that are particularly offensive. For example, even in Houston, you can't drill oil in your backyard. Or there are certain rules controlling where sexually oriented or alcohol-serving businesses can and can't open up. At the same time, too, neighborhoods that have particularly strong preferences for land use regulations can voluntarily opt into them and enjoy some deference from the local government. So for example, Houston won't issue permits that violate local voluntarily opted into land use rules. I think these 2 things have helped to mitigate a lot of the demand for zoning that we see in other contexts. Third and finally, and I think this is key, Houston reveals that while zoning abolition might be a necessary condition for building a great city, it's certainly not sufficient. Houston, like virtually every other city of its era, made almost every other planning mistake that could have been made. Built the giant urban freeways, callously allowed development into wetlands and other environmentally sensitive areas, etc. But to the extent that Houston can grow and adapt and change over time to a degree that almost no other city can, it's well positioned to correct a lot of those other issues. In the next chapter, we'll talk about all those other things that have to be paired with zoning abolition, and the important role that planners will continue to play even in an environment where we're not micromanaging the number of parking spaces in strip malls or keeping fourplexes out of cul-de-sacs.